We live in an era obsessed with dopamine. Infinite swipes, constant notifications, likes, digital achievements. We chase pleasure after pleasure, reward after reward. But we are getting more and more miserable. Schopenhauer, in the 19th century, already warned, happiness is always negative, only pain is positive. What did he mean? That we run after illusions, mirages of happiness that dissolve as soon as we reach them. Today, neuroscience confirms it. The unbridled search for dopamine keeps us on an endless hamster wheel. But there's one alternative that few explore: oxytocin, the hormone of human connection. In this video, we'll dive into an uncomfortable truth about happiness, using Schopenhauer's philosophy and groundbreaking scientific discoveries about how our brains process social cooperation. Part 1. The Illusion of Dopaminergic Happiness. Schopenhauer was brutal in his honesty. He wrote, "As long as we are under the dominion of desires, under the dominion of the will, there is neither rest nor happiness for us. Whether we incarnate ourselves in any persecution or flee from any threat, it is the same thing. The cares caused by the demands of the will do not cease to disturb us and torment our existence." What does this mean in practice? Think about the last time you got something you really wanted. A new cell phone, a promotion, 1,000 followers on Instagram. How did you feel 2 weeks later? Schopenhauer explains, any desire is born of a need, of a deprivation, of a suffering. By satisfying him, he calms down. But even if one is satisfied, how many remain unsatisfied? Desire lasts a long time, the demands are endless, enjoyment is short and greedily measured. That's the dopamine trap. It gives us intense but fleeting pleasure. And the more we chase it, the more we need it to feel the same effect. It is the vicious cycle that keeps us slaves to the will, as Schopenhauer would say. The philosopher continues, there is nothing fixed in the fugitive life, neither infinite pain nor eternal joy. Once the passion is satisfied, every lover experiences a strange disappointment. He wonders that the object of so many passionate desires only gives him an ephemeral pleasure, followed by a quick disenchantment. Does this sound familiar? It's the feeling after eating that food you wanted so much, buying that product, getting that like. Nature deceives us with promises of happiness to make us act, but happiness never really comes. As Schopenhauer summarized, man's life oscillates like a pendulum between pain and boredom, such are in reality its last two elements. But there is a way out. And it doesn't come from completely denying desires. That would be impossible for most of us. The way out comes from redirecting our search. A groundbreaking 2015 study, published in the journal Neuropsychopharmacology, revealed something fascinating about oxytocin, the so-called love hormone. Researchers at Yale University, Johns Hopkins, and Beijing have found that oxytocin has opposite effects depending on how our mind is working. The experiment worked like this. 150 Chinese men were divided into groups. Half received nasal oxytocin, half placebo. Then they were put to play a game of public goods, basically, deciding whether to cooperate with members of their group or another group. The shocking finding: when people used intuitive thinking, oxytocin increased cooperation with one's own group and decreased with other groups. But when they used reflective, analytical thinking, oxytocin had the opposite effect. It decreased group favoritism and increased fairer behaviors. What does that mean? Oxytocin is not just good or bad. It interacts with our cognitive style. And here's the connection to Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer distinguished between being dominated by the will, intuitive, instinctive, automatic, and using reflective contemplation. He wrote, "When a strange circumstance or our inner harmony sweeps us away for a moment from the infinite torrent of desire, the spirit frees us from the oppression of the will. It is then that this rest, sought in vain in the open paths of desire but which has always eluded us, presents itself and gives us the feeling of peace in all its fullness." Oxytocin, when combined with conscious reflection, can free us from the automatic selfishness of the will. It connects us to others in a genuine, non-tribal way. Schopenhauer devoted an entire chapter to pity, the ability to feel the suffering of others as one's own. And he considered it the only real basis of morality. Listen to this. Pity is that admirable, mysterious fact by which we see the line of demarcation, which in the eyes of reason totally separates one being from another, disappear, and the non-self becomes in some way the self. Isn't that exactly what oxytocin does? It dissolves the barriers between us and others, especially when we are not in automatic, tribal, us versus them mode. The study showed that people who used reflective thinking and were given oxytocin had less group favoritism. They cooperated in a more universal, more compassionate way. Schopenhauer continues, One can object to every good action that arises solely from religious convictions, which is not disinterested. Considering the moral motive of piety, who would dare to deny that in all ages, in all peoples, piety does not lavish its beneficial effects? Oxytocin, combined with reflective awareness, may be the neurobiological pathway to piety that Schopenhauer so valued. But how does this work in practice? How do we escape the dopaminergic trap and grow oxytocin in a healthy way? In the next part, we'll explore just that, the practical mechanisms of transformation and why most people fail to try. In the first part, we saw how the search for dopamine keeps us slaves to what Schopenhauer called will, an endless cycle of desire, momentary satisfaction, and new emptiness. We found that oxytocin can be an alternative, but its effect depends radically on how our mind is processing decisions. Now let's dive into the two mental systems that determine whether oxytocin frees us or imprisons us further. The study we analyzed found something that revolutionizes our understanding of human cooperation. We have two completely different mental systems processing our social decisions. System 1: intuition, fast, automatic, emotional. Schopenhauer would call this being under the dominion of the will. It is the system that reacts without thinking, that feels first and rationalizes later. Neurologically, this system involves amygdala, striatum, nucleus accumbens, ventral medial prefrontal cortex. These are the same areas that oxytocin modulates directly. System 2: reflection, slow, deliberate, analytical. It is what Schopenhauer called disinterested contemplation. The system that pauses, ponders, considers multiple perspectives. Neurologically, lateral prefrontal cortex, dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, medial temporal lobe. Here's the revolutionary insight. When study participants were induced to use System 1, intuition, oxytocin increased cooperation with one's own group by 54%, but decreased with other groups. When they were induced to use System 2, reflection, oxytocin had the opposite effect. It decreased tribalism and increased universal cooperation. Schopenhauer had already realized this 180 years ago. Selfishness by nature has no limits. Man has only one absolute desire: to preserve existence, to exempt himself from any pain. Any obstacle that arises between his selfishness and his greed excites his anger, hatred. It is an enemy that must be crushed. This is System 1 out of control. But he continues, when a strange circumstance or our inner harmony snatches us for a moment from the infinite torrent of desire, frees our spirit from the oppression of the will, diverts our attention from everything that solicits it, and things appear to us disconnected from all the prestige of hope, it is then that this rest presents itself. That's System 2, the ability to get out of automatic mode and see things as they really are, without the filter of instinctive selfishness. In the experiment, the researchers did something ingenious. Before the game, participants were asked to write about a situation in their lives where intuition group. You followed your first intuition and it worked. Reflection group. You thought carefully and made an analytical decision. This simple manipulation completely changed how oxytocin worked in their brains. It wasn't oxytocin alone, nor thought alone. It was the interaction between biology and cognition. Here's a problem that no one talks about. Oxytocin can make us worse if we're not careful. When we release oxytocin in intuitive, automatic mode, it strengthens bonds, but only with our group. It creates an emotional dividing line, us versus them. The study showed this clearly. Participants with oxytocin plus intuitive thinking contributed 12% more with members of their own group, but they treated members of other groups with less cooperation. Increased group favoritism by 47%. This explains terrible phenomena in human history. Tightly knit tribes that massacre other tribes. Nations that love their citizens but dehumanize foreigners. Fans who love each other but fight violently with rivals. Schopenhauer observed this pattern. There are only three fundamental causes of human actions. A. Selfishness, which wants its own good, it has no limits. B. Wickedness, which desires evil from others, it goes to extreme cruelty. C. Piety, which wants the good of others. Oxytocin in the intuitive mode can serve both selfishness and pity, depending on who we consider us. If our circle is narrow, only family, only our tribe, only our country, oxytocin reinforces collective selfishness. Even more fascinating, the researchers also measured the participants' expectations. Everyone expected their own group to cooperate more. This didn't change with oxytocin or type of thinking. But the actual behavior has changed dramatically. This means that oxytocin wasn't just changing what people consciously thought, it was changing their automatic impulses, their instinctual actions. Schopenhauer described this phenomenon perfectly. Instinct, it causes the individual to act for the good of the species. Thus, in this instinct as in all others, truth is clothed with illusion to act on the will. It is an illusion of voluptuousness that makes the deceptive image of a sovereign happiness shine in the eyes of man. Oxytocin plus intuition creates an illusion. My group is good, other groups are threats. And we act accordingly without even realizing it. But there is a better way. A path that Schopenhauer pointed out and that neuroscience now confirms. When study participants were induced to use reflective thinking before receiving oxytocin, something remarkable happened. Group favoritism decreased by 34%. Cooperation has become more universal. Less tribal decisions became fairer, considering everyone as worthy of cooperation. Why? Because reflection activates different brain areas: lateral prefrontal cortex, which supervises impulses, dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which detects conflicts between impulses and values. Schopenhauer anticipated exactly this when he wrote about art. When a strange circumstance or our inner harmony sweeps us away for a moment from the infinite torrent of desire, things appear to us detached from all the prestige of hope, from all self-interest, as objects of disinterested contemplation and not of greed. It is then that this rest presents itself and gives us the feeling of peace in all its fullness. He called this a state free from all goods. A state where we are not pursuing something for us, but contemplating reality as it is. More fascinating, the researchers didn't just manipulate the thinking in the experiment. They also asked the participants before the study, how important is your intuition in daily decisions? How important is careful reflection? Result: people who said they value reflection in daily life showed the same patterns. With oxytocin, they were less tribal, more universally cooperative. People who said they value intuition in daily life? With oxytocin, they became more tribal. This was not just a momentary effect of experimental manipulation. It was a personality trait, a habit of mind that completely modulated how biology worked. Schopenhauer wrote about asceticism and piety. When the veil of Maya is lifted before the eyes of a man, in such a way that it no longer makes a selfish difference between his person and other men, and takes as much interest in strange sufferings as in his own, thus becoming charitable to the point of dedication. This man considers as his own the infinite sufferings of everything that lives. Oxytocin plus reflection is the neurobiological basis of this lifting of the veil. It is when we stop seeing only my group and begin to see shared humanity, universal suffering. A crucial detail: oxytocin did not change the speed of decisions. It wasn't that people in reflective mode were just thinking more slowly. It was that they were thinking differently, engaging different brain circuits, processing social information through a different filter. As Schopenhauer said about moral principles, although principles and abstract reason are by no means the primitive origin or the first foundation of morality, they are nevertheless indispensable to the moral life. It is like a reservoir fed by the source of all morality. Reflection doesn't create the ability to cooperate or empathize. Oxytocin is already there, biology is already there. But reflection directs this ability beyond the narrow circle of us versus them. In the previous parts, we found that the search for dopamine traps us in the cycle of desire satisfaction emptiness that Schopenhauer denounced. We have seen that oxytocin can be an alternative, but it only works liberatingly when combined with reflective, non-intuitive thinking. Now, the million-dollar question: how do we apply this in practice? How do we grow reflective oxytocin in the real world? And why does this matter for our mental health? We live in a paradoxical time. We have more connections than ever before, hundreds of Facebook friends, thousands of followers, instant messaging 24/7. But we are lonelier, more anxious, and more depressed than any previous generation. Why? Because we're looking for the wrong kind of connection. Social media, likes, digital validation, all of these release dopamine, not genuine oxytocin. It is the illusion of connection without the real substance. And worse, it keeps our brain in intuitive, automatic, reactive mode. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Instant reaction. Digital tribalism. My political group versus theirs. My idols versus enemies. It's oxytocin in the most dangerous way, empowering digital tribes while dehumanizing those who think differently. Schopenhauer foresaw exactly this trap. Our civilized world is nothing but a great masquerade. There are knights, friars, soldiers, doctors. But they are not what they represent. They are mere masks under which money speculators are usually hidden. Today we would say, speculators of attention. All wearing digital masks, performing edited versions of themselves, seeking dopaminergic validation while real loneliness corrodes from within. The statistics are alarming. Epidemic loneliness in all age groups, anxiety and depression at record levels, extreme social division and polarization, inability to cooperate across differences. Schopenhauer wrote of modern man. Millions of men gathered in nations concur for the public good. However, thousands of victims fall. It is then that the sweat and blood of the great mass flow in abundance. In time of peace, industry and commerce prosper. But what is the target of so many efforts? To keep for a short time these ephemeral and tormented beings, to keep them in the most favorable case in a bearable misery and an absence of relative pain that boredom soon takes advantage of. We are caught between the pain of dopaminergic search and boredom when we stop, just as he predicted. But the study on oxytocin shows us a way out. A path that requires, paradoxically, slowing down in a world obsessed with speed. Based on Schopenhauer's study in philosophy, here are concrete practices for growing oxytocin of the right kind. Practice 1. Reflective pauses before social interactions. Study participants who were induced to reflect before social interaction had completely different results. You can do the same. Before joining a meeting a friend, or even answering important messages, stop for 2 to 3 minutes. Ask yourself, what really matters in this interaction? How do I want the other person to feel? Am I reacting automatically or consciously choosing? Schopenhauer on this practice. Although principles and abstract reason are by no means the primitive origin of morality, they are nevertheless indispensable to the moral life. It is like a reservoir fed by the source of all morality. Practice 2. Consciously expand the moral circle. The study showed that oxytocin plus intuition creates tribalism. Oxytocin plus reflection creates universalism. How do we do that? Daily exercise. Choose someone outside your usual circle. Someone of different political opinion, different social class, different country. Dedicate 5 minutes to read about challenges that person faces. Vividly imagine the world from her perspective, recognizing shared humanity. Schopenhauer called this piety, and considered it the only real basis of morality. Pity is that admirable, mysterious fact by which we see the line of demarcation, which in the eyes of reason totally separates one being from another, disappear and the non-self become in some way the self. Piety alone is the principle of all free justice and all true charity. Practice 3. Long and deep face-to-face interactions. Oxytocin is released through prolonged eye contact, not the quick glance of a video call, appropriate physical touch, hugs, warm handshakes. Conversations of at least 20 minutes, uninterrupted, genuine mutual vulnerability. The study used interactions of at least 35 minutes after oxytocin administration. They were not quick and superficial interactions. They were deep engagements where important decisions were at stake. Schedule weekly 1 to 2 face-to-face meetings of at least 30 minutes where cell phone is far away and the conversation goes beyond the superficial. Practice 4. Reflective diary about interactions. The researchers asked participants to write about a reflective decision experience. The act of writing activates the reflective system. End of the day. Take 10 minutes to write about your social interactions for the day. Where did I act automatically versus consciously? When did I favor my group without just reason? Where could I have been more universally compassionate? Schopenhauer on this practice of self-knowledge. When we make acquaintance with a man, we do not try to weigh his intelligence. Let us rather consider his sufferings, miseries, anguishes, pains, and thus we will feel how closely he touches us. It is then that he will arouse our sympathy. Practice 5. Reduce rapid dopaminergic cycles. Rapid dopamine keeps you in System 1. To access System 2 plus oxytocin. Reduce notification checks to 3x a day maximum. No endless scrolling, set fixed time and clear purpose. Replace 30 minutes of social media with 30 minutes of face-to-face conversation. Practice productive boredom, unstimulated moments where the mind can reflect. This is not easy. Your brain will resist. The first few days will be uncomfortable. But remember, life is by no means presented as a treat that we are given to enjoy, but rather as a duty, a task that must be fulfilled by the workforce. Schopenhauer. Real freedom requires work. The study we analyzed has huge implications for the treatment of mental disorders. The researchers wrote something crucial. Patients with social dysfunctions are characterized by different cognitive processing styles. People with social anxiety have subtypes of high and low impulsivity, different cognitive styles. Bipolar patients are more intuitive than unipolar. Depressed patients. People on the autism spectrum have poor intuition, think more analytically. Borderline personality disorder shows more impulsive processing. Oxytocin is being tested as a treatment for all of these conditions. But the study shows, the effect of oxytocin depends radically on the person's cognitive style. For someone who processes the world intuitively, oxytocin can increase tribal behaviors, potentially worsening some social symptoms. For someone who processes reflexively, oxytocin can facilitate universal cooperation and genuine empathy. The researchers conclude, understanding how cognitive styles influence oxytocin effects is critical for successful clinical translation. Schopenhauer had already realized something similar almost 200 years ago. Does consciousness originate in nature? One can doubt it. At least there is also a bastard conscience. The anguish and regret caused by our actions are often nothing other than the fear of the consequences. Not every emotional response is genuine morality. Not every release of oxytocin is a genuine connection. Cognitive context matters fundamentally. This explains why oxytocin treatments have such inconsistent results in the literature. Some studies show strong effects, others show weak or no effects, some even show negative effects. It's not that oxytocin is ineffective. It's just that we're ignoring half of the equation, the individual's cognitive style. Let's go back to the original question. Why look for oxytocin instead of dopamine? Because dopamine is the chemic of persecution. Keeps us running, wishing, never satisfied. As Schopenhauer wrote, the relentless efforts to banish suffering only have the result of making it change its figure. If he finds no other free access, he takes the sad and brown mantle of boredom, and the dance begins again. Oxytocin, when cultivated consciously through reflection, is the chemistry of genuine connection. It takes us off the hamster wheel. Dopamine tells us, more, more, more. Reflective oxytocin tells us, here, now, together. Dopamine is lonely, you can chase alone in a dark cave with a cell phone. Oxytocin requires others, you need real human presence. Dopamine strengthens the isolated self, always wanting to. Reflective oxytocin dissolves barriers, revealing our interdependence. Schopenhauer ended his book with these words about those who transcended the egoistic will. We see then, instead of these irresistible passions, this restless activity, instead of the hope that nothing satisfies and that is never satisfied, we see peace superior to all reason, that great calm sea of feeling, that deep quiet, that unshakable security, that serenity. This is the state free from all goods. You have a choice to make today, right now, in this moment. To continue chasing the dopaminergic peaks that technology offers, likes, notifications, superficial validation, momentary pleasure followed by emptiness? Or slow down, reflect, genuinely connect, grow oxytocin, the kind that actually liberates? The 5 practices. Reflective pauses before interactions, consciously expanding the moral circle, long and deep face-to-face interactions. Reflective diary about interactions reduce rapid dopaminergic cycles. It's not easy. Schopenhauer did not promise that it would be. Life is a task that we must perform laboriously. But it is the only real way out of the suffering he so brutally described. And now we have the neuroscience that confirms the path. Stop chasing dopamine. Cultivate reflective oxytocin. Find peace in the calm sea of genuine connection. The choice is yours. The time is now.